My next guest in the waiting room, Mohammed Abbas Khaki, is listed amongst the top 50 most influential GPs in the UK. He's an award-winning portfolio GP who has presented at TED Talks, and perhaps most importantly, his humanitarian work, the founding of WhoisHussain, a grassroots charity that spans across 30 countries and aims to tackle social injustice through his incredible positive change. He is a colleague and friend, and it is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Dr. Mohammed Abbas Khaki. As with so many of our guests, you've got an incredible journey, and what we are here for today are not to just hear about the work that you've done, perhaps the stories that are present in between that so many of us haven't heard. Okay. And I'd like to begin that story with where you grew up and who your parents are.
I grew up in North London, and my parents were, and still are, really a huge inspiration for me. I think I'm very blessed to have role models who are right on my doorstep, who are guiding me every moment of every day, and even now, still advising, still trying to help me, always saying, look, there's an opportunity to help, there's an opportunity to serve, there's an opportunity to do something to make someone else's life better. I think for me, that has been hugely influential, instructive. I think when you think about your parents, you also think about the things they tell you. But what I've realized recently is, especially having just had a little girl, is that children watch you and they watch how you behave and then they mimic it. So from an early age, I've seen my father always trying to balance his professional work with his altruistic work, his charity work, his endeavors to go and do international aid work. And he says, come on, come with me, see how we can help people. And there's my mum, who's this kind of like 24/7 ready at any moment to call. You know, if we called her now and said, could you come and help us? She'd say, yeah, I'll be there and I'm ready.
Where did this passion of wanting to become a doctor touch your life?
Good question. I think it was when Fulham Football Club messaged me and said, well, not messaged, but sent them a letter saying, we'd like you to join the academy. And I just got my GCSEs. And then I think it was when my mother decided that I would not be doing football. And so she gently guided me towards medicine. I was always someone who loved helping people. Anything you can do to help someone is a magical thing. If you can go into a career, a job, where all you do is turn up to work to help other people. All you do is go there, not necessarily with a huge financial reward, not necessarily what you perhaps think you should be remunerated for, just for the sake of doing that. Your decisions are made, and we're so lucky to be in the UK to have that. Decisions are made not on their finances or insurance, just on how I can help you to the best of my ability. And a life spent in that service is fantastic. So even though I still think about being a football player, I think I was very blessed that we had that guidance and consideration of medicine as a career option, which has proven to be such an amazing thing for me.
You took part, and this is the beginnings of one of the first stories that we have the privilege of hearing from you, and that is the aid to the Balkans.
Sure.
And to this day, we still hear the cries of the children from Bosnia. Can I hear about the time that you spent there and the things that you experienced there?
Yeah, I had always seen my father doing so much aid work and international work, my mother always being so helpful, and my inkling and inclination was always to go and do something. And then this opportunity to go and help out with the situation in the Balkans. And of course, there'd been this mass genocide. There had been families ripped apart. So we went that summer, and I think it was just one of the most heartbreaking experiences that I've seen. You had all these young children who you were there to help rebuild the community centre, help them with the English, talk about giving them some things to do and support the community. And all you could see on them was a longing for companionship, for fatherhood, for brotherhood, for a role model, a figure who they could be with. I remember a young boy called Dimitri, and he would hold my hand. He would follow you. He'd walk. He'd sit with you, and then I spoke to the convener, and I said, "What's happened to him?" And he said, "He lost his father. He lost his brother. He's got no one." And that was my first real experience of an orphan who was just looking for companionship. When you see children who are so sweet and so innocent and have their future taken away in such a way, and all they want is that tactile touch, all they want is a hand on their shoulder, all they want is someone to say, "I'm here for you, you're doing well." And these are basic things.
If I may quote you, "If you want to learn about war, listen to the children," is what Niaz, the convener, had said to you.
Yeah.
And in so many eloquent ways, you heard so many stories from those children.
I remember Elena, she had so many dreams of doing things, so many things she wanted to do. She wanted to study, she wanted to be a nurse, she wanted to be a pilot, she wanted to all these amazing things. It was so difficult because you had this girl who was so talented. You would speak to her and she had this amazing English and she was so young. She was able to draw, she had that emotional intelligence to read the room and say, "I think he needs a bit of help." And yet when you speak to her, "What do you want to do?" "I'm just going to look after my mum." "What's your plan? What do you want to study?" "No, I'm just going to stay here." It was like the light in her eyes had gone. And it was just so heartbreaking because you could see the potential and yet that war has taken it away from children and they have been nothing to do with this. They have not done anything. They have not been any party of it. That war snatched the future from that generation.
And this leads to an important conversation that you had in the garage, of all places, with some friends, near enough in the middle of the night, and has led to the creation of this huge grassroots movement that spans over 30 countries and has helped thousands and thousands of people. And so my next question is, who is Hussain?
Good question. I mean, Hussain is a hero of mine, of many people. And he is that rare thing, that inspiration, that motivation, that ideology of selflessness, of helping those downtrodden, of walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And this is where he separates himself. This is where, when you see Gandhi's salt mine march of 72 people, he said, "Why 72? Because he looked at Hussain, he said, "Well, Hussain had 72. Look at his impact." And you look at Gandhi and you look at him and how he inspired Martin Luther King, for example, and you say, "Well, hold on a second here. Something's happening. All these inspirational figures are taking inspiration, but when you root back, this chap Hussain is one of the pioneers. He gave everything, including his own life, to uphold the message of truth, of justice, of selflessness, of standing with those who've been marginalized by society." We all were sitting there thinking, but where's the role model? Where's the inspiration to do the right thing? And we remembered Hussain and we thought, gosh, but he's such a powerful motivational tool. Why doesn't anyone know about him? Why is no one being him? And we asked ourselves, well, who is Hussain today? And we looked at each other and we thought, well, it has to be us. Can't always look at everyone and point fingers. You've got to step up. So that was an amazing point. And then there was the discussion afterwards because, we're now a global charity, 100+ teams. I think we've fed over 500,000 people. We've done over 1 million ongoing charitable acts, feeding the homeless every week, food banks, things that are just, really incredible things that I can't even take any moment of credit for. This is our amazing global teams. But this all started from us saying, we're going to be that change. We're going to make the difference that we want to see. The things that we want to see in society, we're doing it now. We're not waiting. It just felt like it was meant to be. And we just worked feverishly to get it done. And it was, and what do we do? Well, we slept in the streets of London for one night to raise money for St Mungo's. And we brought together 150 people who didn't know each other. You know, there's a few of us who knew each other, friends, but there were people from, I don't know where, coming along saying we want to come and join in and support. And it was an amazing experience. We've been so blessed from that moment because our team has grown and the effort has been amazing and the impact has been huge. And I think it's just been a huge blessing, really.
There are many chapters to your story, and the first chapter I'd like to hear about is the atrocities that you saw in Rohingya.
Rohingya was my last medical trip before COVID. And there was a few planned after, but of course everything's been... But it was actually the one that has like burnt a hole in my consciousness. It was the one that I had heard things that I have never heard. I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know where to begin. I don't even know how graphic we would go before it would be too much to even hear these things. Our role in Rohingya was to look at developing education materials, training the doctors so that we were able to make a lasting impact by upskilling them, by showing them how to do refugee medicine. And I remember my main aim was to go and observe. But when you get there, there's 100, 250 people waiting. So you can observe for a while, but you have to then, you can't help but get involved. I would say to a mother who comes in with her children and she wants something, a check, or she's worried about something. And I remember saying to her, you've got, 4 or 5 children. And she said to me, yeah. And I said, yeah, that's is it normal to have such a big family? And she said, well, we're so vulnerable here. She said, these are my only protection. She said, people get raped in the camp regularly. And then, I've got 3 sisters. I was with my wife. I couldn't even, that was right in the camps. Then she would say, then I said to her, she was with a friend and she was and her friend said to me, was just crying all the time. And I said to her, why is she crying? What can we help with? What? They took 100 newborn babies, and they held them up, and the mothers, and they said, they had like a gun and they said, you either try and save your baby and we'll shoot you, or you run now and we'll give you the option. I don't even know what the hell that choice is. I was a bit broken at that day. I don't know, it was, I wasn't prepared for what the atrocities they've been through. There was a lady who I remember called Nora. She was smiling and I said to her, my name's Dr. Khaki, lovely to meet you. How can I help? And she said, I just want some multivitamins. I said, okay, so, what's the reason that you need multivitamins? And she's smiling at me, but you can tell she's nodding, she's sizing me up, and there was something. And I said, so is everything okay? And she said, yeah, everything's fine. I said, are you sure? You seem quite anxious. And it was the first time her smile faltered. I said, when people eat well, they don't need multivitamins. And she sort of dropped her smile and she said to me, I'm not eating for 3 months. I said, what do you mean? And she said to me that, she said, I saw 3 months ago, my husband and my son murdered in front of my eyes. And I can't eat any food. That's why you have multivitamins to survive. And then she started crying, and we just both looked at each other and held each other's hands, and I don't know, it was, how could that happen to her? I don't think we can live in a world where people are suffering like that and we just sit back and let it happen. There were so many women who'd been through such terrible experiences, families murdered, brutally made these horrendous life choices. They're all suffering in so many ways. You know, you'd have people coming coughing, and it wasn't the cough of a smoker that we see here, it was the cough of someone who was choking from the smoke of the house and running. It was the cuts and bruises on children that you don't see because they've been playing. It's because they've been falling and running and hitting trees and bumping and being whipped and just trying to get out. And I think that forever, that's just like burnt a hole in my head. Like I can't get it out. I think that experience was singularly one of the most horrific I've ever experienced.
Thank you so much for having the courage and the dignity to share those stories. And in some ways, I don't make any apologies to those who are listening, because this is exactly why we must hear about what's going on and the things that you've experienced. But I'm so grateful that you've told us these things. One of the worst tragedies that we've had here in the UK, and there have been many here and across the world, is that of Grenfell.
I had booked that time off for annual leave. It was the last 7-10 days, so I thought I'd take time off. So I called up and said, look, I called and tried to get hold of any number, and I said, look, I'd love to help. I'm a doctor. I've got experience in this. And they said, look, I think we're okay. We're staffed, okay. So I said, fine. And then I said, well, I'm not a doctor anymore. I'll do anything I can. So I called up the friends and said, guys, let's do something. And we all said, right. So we collected food, we collected aid. We said, look, we'll just go down there. And this is, I guess, a lesson to so many people. And I tell people this all the time. You don't have to be a medical person. You just have to be someone who wants to do something. Just turn up with your hands and your energy and do something. So that's what we did. I just thought in my head, let me bring my stethoscope and medical kit just in case there is a need. So we came to the church there, and we were helping provisions, doing this and loading trolleys and moving things and working out on the ground. And there were so many people, and it was like the most beautiful synergy of hope, of love, of selflessness, of color, of culture, of that melting pot where everyone was hand to hand. It carried this load to this load to this load. We didn't know anybody. And nobody said, who are you? Why are you here? It was just, you here to help? Great, join. And that spirit of selflessness was probably one of the most beautiful things I remember from the first part of that night. And then when we got to ground zero, that's when it became a bit spooky, a bit chilly. You had this odd feeling because you knew that the Grenfell Tower was there, and you're there, and you know that people have died. You know people have perished, and you feel it was haunting. Even now, I can feel myself there, and it's really an odd experience. And we did whatever we could really for the next few weeks. But I remember it was some of the most heartbreaking things that you saw of how family had lost family, of how friends were confused, discombobulated. They couldn't believe what was happening. When you see trauma like that in such an acute situation, people they couldn't cope because it was right there. You know, you walking in and you can smell it. You know, the first thing when we came out of the car was the smell of burning. And it was a foreboding, and it reminded you where you were, and it grounded you, and it reminded you that you're here to help because something serious has happened.
The next thing love to have the privilege of hearing are your experiences of Calais and some of the stories that came from there.
I had just finished my training as a GP, and I was working at practice, and I really enjoyed the practice. And I remember saying to the practice manager, I want to go off and do some work in Calais and a few other areas and things. And she said to me, unfortunately, all leave is booked up for 6 months. And I know this sounds absolutely mad, and people are probably thinking, what are you talking about? But you're mad. But my determination to work in these areas and try to experience and make a difference was so huge. I said, fine. I said, I'm going to have to give you my notice. And when we got to Calais the first time, I remember thinking, this is much worse than you see on the news. The thing that you don't see in so many aid areas is the senses. You don't experience them. The smell, the sight, the noise. And the first thing I remember was thinking, there's such a smell of sewage here. And I remember saying to them, one of the people, like, what is this? And they said, this is our tap. And it was like one tap in the middle of the camp. And I said, what do you mean? They said, well, this is our camp where we wash, shower. But I said, there's one tap. They said, yeah, this is for everyone. And I look around, there's a massive camp. And I was just shocked at the depravity. No one can live like that. This is not human to have people living in these circumstances in Europe, so close. And yet there was something incredibly cheerful and positive I remember about the people there. They were so happy, and so their camaraderie towards us, not the circumstance, but towards us. And I remember saying to one of them, why are you so cheerful when you see us? He said, you represent people who care. You show us that people still care for us. You show us that we're not sidelined, marginalized, that we're human, that we're still human even if we're trapped. And I remember thinking, this is the path of what I should be doing. This is the path of what we all should be doing, because when we go to give to other people, we find our purpose.
Amazing. It's such a privilege to hear these stories, and they're deeply moving. And I apologize to you again for taking you to our next chapter, which is that of LesBos.
LesBos was all over the news. The refugee crisis was at its biggest peak, and I had obviously chucked in my job, so I was a bit more flexible with timing. One of the charities who I was working with said to me, we want to go to LesBos, would you spearhead the team? So I said, okay. We were walking around the camp, and the convener said to us, look, why don't you join me tonight at the beach? What we do is we look for the dinghies, and anyone who's coming in, we help and support. And I think that was one of my most harrowing nights, because when you get to the beach, what you see is the remnants of lives that have gone. What I mean by that is, there's pebbles, but what you see on the pebbles is ID documents, photos, pictures, prayer books, clothes, scattered, so many of them, of children, and of just so many children who have tried to escape the persecution of their countries to come here for a better life. And you just see, and it's like a ghost beach. It's haunting, because you pick them up and you see a child smiling, or a child looking for a passport photo or an ID doc, and they've dropped them in haste, trying to just get off this terrible boat. And whilst that's all going on, and your heart is soft and your tears are forming, and it's really cold, and you're thinking, people are coming here for this, for losing all of this, losing their life and all their. Suddenly we saw a boat, and he said, "Oh, the boat's coming." So we said, "Okay." There's only two of us, a teacher, another. He said, "Okay, just get ready." So as it's coming in, we start wading in, start grabbing them and helping. And he said, "Look, get them in." And what you do is you triage at the time, and whoever the sickest is, you have to sort of bring them in. And I remember this father just gives me this child. So this is my son Ali. So I'm looking at this boy and he's hardly moving. He is not breathing. He is just looking at death's door. And I'm holding him thinking, this is petrifying. This is terrifying. What I could be holding either a child who'll make it, or I could be holding a dead child here. When his father came to the tent and we locked eyes and he said, is he okay? I said, I hope he's okay. I hope, come. And I could just see so much despair and pain and worry, and I think that was the moment when I realized this is so real. He was a child who's not drunk anything for 2 days and is freezing, and his pulse is not, and all the things, and you're in the middle of a refugee camp. I mean, how do you give solace? I think LesBos was one of those places where you see things that will haunt you forever. You see the ghosts of families. You see the futures, and you see the past, and you see them all mixed up, and it's a lottery of who's going to have a future.
And lastly, may we hear briefly some of the stories that you saw during your time in Iraq?
Iraq was one of those strange places, is one of those strangest places where I've continued to go back and do relief and aid work. When I saw the poverty and the children and the orphans, it was too much. We would go to cities and towns and help and give medication and do blood pressure checks and sugars and help and read. Part of that first trip also was heartbreaking, because you would go to villages and you would say, how can I help? And they would say, well, look, I have this illness, I have that. And these were illnesses came from chemical warfare, biological warfare that had been used against these people by Saddam. It was once a village, and I still see it in my head. And I said, oh, there was a pond or something. And I said, what's your fresh water source? And they said, that. And I said, sorry? I said, this is what Saddam did. He stopped all the water to our village, and this was our water source. So they were trying to get the water purified, or they were bringing bottles or something, but ultimately they were drinking still dirty water. And then I remembered when I went home that the way to, I realized that, hold on, the way to make an impact would be, we need to think long term. We can't just go there and give medication. We need to, so we worked with a charity to make a clinic for the most impoverished, those who have nothing, that gives even the local doctors, nurses and dentists an opportunity to work, supported by charity donations to cover things. We can do it. And part of my first trip, we met a lot of widows and children, and there are thousands and thousands. And we said, well, maybe we need to do something more. So the next trip, once this is clinic set up, we decided to come back and do mental health provision, art therapy. We planned it in months. I got psychologists, psychotherapists, psychiatrists, and various different healthcare professionals to come and give a really good multidisciplinary approach to assess, to help, and to train. And all I remember seeing was children who were orphans and had lost that will, had lost that fire, had lost that drive, because their fathers had gone. They didn't have that role model. And you see that these children have been through untold traumas.
We work in the NHS, and we're both very proud to work in the NHS, and we're very proud to be healthcare professionals here and around the world. Briefly, what is your message for the NHS workers who feel burnt out, disillusioned, undervalued, nurses, doctors, surgeons, porters, receptionists, any healthcare professional here and around the world?
We've had the most deadly virus we've seen, coupled with the biggest demand on healthcare, coupled with uncertainty, challenge, anxiety, stress, on a background of a really challenging situation already. And all I have seen is the most unbelievably incredible, resilient, powerful, selfless energy being given out by the healthcare teams in the NHS. Firsthand, I've seen it, and around the world. These are the people who have been role models, who have stepped up, who have given so much of themselves, who have suffered themselves, who have been challenged by the emotional element, by the mental element, by the physical element, by the spiritual element, by the social isolation from their families, who have taken all of that, and despite all of those huge challenges, said, we're going to do something for the greater good. And I'm just honoured to be part of that system.
Thank you so, so much for everything today. Mo, I can't thank you enough for the dignity in which you've shared everything today. For everything that you've said and everything that you've shared. And we are friends and we're colleagues and we go way back. And you've been kind enough to share everything so much with us, and the time you've given. Thank you doesn't seem enough.
Hi Mo, just a short message from me and Zahra to say how much you mean to us. We are so proud of what you do and everything that you've achieved. Thank you for embodying the true meaning of serving, which is a bit tight, whether that's been as a medical doctor looking after your patients or doing media work or through all your global philanthropic work around the world, like setting up the WhoisHussain charity, as well as helping to set up medical facilities in multiple developing countries, and always being at the forefront with your volunteering services and medical aid. But also serving at home with every little thing that you do, looking after the family and us. You do all of this with a true passion, with real love, and with huge amounts of energy. So thank you for being the best teacher, leader, and motivator. Zahra is so lucky to have you as her dad, and we can't wait to see all the incredible things that you go on to do. We love you so much, and Zahra agrees. So we love you, Papa.
That is so nice. Oh my God, I did not expect that at all. That is so lovely.
Thank you so much, brother.
Thank
you for
so
everything.
much.
I'm
No,
so
my pleasure.
grateful.
Thank you.